Hello, I'm Sheila Pearl, love coach and recovering psychotherapist. About 25 years ago, I was in the middle of a therapy session with Amanda, and I heard her voice calling my name. Sheila, Sheila, are you asleep? I was horrified. I was mortified. I was terribly embarrassed and terribly upset for many reasons I would quickly discover. I had fallen asleep in a therapy session with Amanda. Now, Amanda had been coming to me for some time with a series of complaints and difficulties in life, and I had begun to feel weary. I had begun to feel in despair. I had begun to feel ineffective because no matter what I did, no matter how I handled the session, somehow I was feeling Amanda wasn't getting any better. It wasn't working the way I would like it to work. And in long and short, I was feeling I couldn't fix it. So I think my falling asleep was my way of tuning out and giving up. Well, that was a turning point for me in my work as therapist and later to be coach. I realized that something was missing in my toolbox, that somehow I needed to add to my ability to be of assistance to my clients, to really, in the service of them and for my love of them, to find a way to better serve their needs and to give them tools to improve their lives. And so I kind of closed up shop for a while. I had heard about life coaching. And this is after I had gone through graduate school and I had gotten my master's in clinical social work. So I had the tools of the clinician as a MSW. And so anyway, I closed up my shop. I had heard about life coaching and I proceeded to avail myself of the training and the certification as a life coach. In that process of training, I gathered tools for my toolkit that would serve me as both therapist and coach. Things that I found invaluable for me to be of service to the people who needed what I could offer. I realized that part of what I really wanted to do and what appealed to me about coaching was the empowerment piece. So when I fell asleep in my session with Amanda, I fell asleep because I believed I was supposed to fix it, and I couldn't. But I didn't have the tools to empower her. So I realized that I like what coaching gave me the tools to empower my clients. I preferred coaching because coaching uses a wellness model rather than a sickness model. And in the therapeutic world, we have that model which, leads to wanting to fix something that's broken. And I wanted to approach my clients with a view towards their wholeness and their wellness, so I could empower them to find that peace within them, that part of them they needed to put back in place. I saw a greater benefit in focusing on the present and the future. And as a therapist, I was trained to focus on the past, to look at the past, to understand why and how this was happening and why things were falling apart, and to analyze. And I had really begun to learn that analysis leads to some form of paralysis. We hear that a lot. And I discovered that was true for me. And that paralysis turned into my falling asleep in the middle of a therapy session. Yeah. I also knew how important my intuition could be. I somehow sensed that being able to use my intuition in my sessions with my clients was hugely important. So in my training as a coach, that's part of what I learned to access and to develop so that I could bring intuition into the room with my clients. And using my intuition was never anything they talked about in graduate school while I was learning how to be a psychotherapist. So over the past 2 decades and more, I have benefited from the tools of coaching in serving my clients so that I could bring intuition, I could bring empowerment, I could bring the wellness model, I could bring the greater benefit of focusing on the current moment and the future rather than constantly going back to the past. So just to review some of the differences between coaching and therapy, let me share with you these 6 points, which I've kind of alluded to in my introductory comments. Coaching views clients as already whole, whereas therapy looks to resolve a past pain. So already we see a difference in perspective and approach, and it appeals to me to apply that perspective of wholeness to my client. So I'm being a stand for them. I'm able to see them as whole and beautiful and to see their magnificence when perhaps they cannot. And I'm looking to resolve, I'm looking to help them resolve not past difficulties, but to also step into their future. Coaching also looks to the future, whereas therapy looks to the past. Again, I've alluded to this in a couple of places. And so that people see coaching as a method for creating a new future. Coaching is about a client starting from where he or she is, receiving support as they do their inner work necessary to create outer transformation. On the other hand, people seek therapy to cope or come to terms with something that's happened in the past. They're often seeking tools to handle emotional issues that stem from past trauma. And again, when you can apply the coaching tools to the therapeutic tools, now you have real synergy at work, and you can combine the best of what coaching brings to the session for the client, for the love of the client, so that the client is empowered. And also you offer different ways for them to work on designing a new future, regardless of the traumas of their past. Certainly taking into consideration the traumas, but focusing on who they are and what they are now, so they can dig deep into their inner resources and not constantly seek to repair the trauma from the past. Coaching empowers the client to solve his or her own problems, whereas therapy offers guidance and direction. It never felt right to me as a therapist to offer specific advice, and it feels right for me as a coach for my clients to empower them to solve their own problems, to ask the right questions so that they sort out what their choices are, in which way to go, which way to see themselves, and how to create their future. Coaching focuses on outer action with measurable results, whereas counseling focuses on the inner, the conscious and subconscious mind. Now, this is where I like to bring the awareness of where a person is right now, and also to bring the intuitive wisdom into the conversation, and to bring the awareness of what our thoughts are and what our beliefs are, so we can begin to understand the role that our thoughts play and our beliefs play in the actions that we take and the choices that we make, so that we're combining and benefiting from both the coaching approach and the therapeutic approach. Coaching takes place over a short term, whereas the therapeutic alliance and the therapist-client relationship is often a longer term one. Now, as a coach over the past 20 years, I've had clients who come to me, we work on specific issues, and then they'll go away and continue to live their lives, and then they come back. They often don't stay with me for a long period of time, in a continuous period of time. But maybe I will maintain a relationship with my clients because they're going through different stages of their lives and having the rough spots at different times. Then they'll come back and we'll work on some other things, and so we maintain a long-term relationship but short-term projects. Number 6, coaches don't diagnose. Therapists and other mental health professionals do. So it's important that I maintain my role as a coach and not diagnose my clients. They are not my patients, they are my clients, and yet to recognize that as a therapist, I also am aware of certain dysfunctions and diagnoses that may apply so that I can either refer my client out to a psychotherapist, to a psychologist, to a psychiatrist, because I'm attuned to what that particular behavior may be about, where they can benefit from coaching and from therapy with another colleague. So I want to just talk about 4 of my clients in which I used a combination of coaching tools as well as therapy tools and awareness. So Jessica had been in a series of relationships where she seemed to be choosing the same kind of partner and having a similar kind of result. And the partners didn't seem to be the same to her at first, and yet because of our conversations and my helping her to sort out who they were and what they were like and what they had in common, she began to see a common pattern. So I became curious and I listened to my intuitive voice, in which I wanted to understand more about what she believed she could have in her life, which may have had a lot to do with what her past experiences in her life had taught her. So here I'm taking the perspective of therapy, which is going into the past so we can understand how and why something may have developed to the point it has, but also using the coaching tools in which I'm staying in the present and helping her to forge a desire and a picture of what she wants in her future, and to help her see that perhaps she's believed ABC in the past, which has brought her the same results, and now she wants to see another kind of result in her future, so we're sorting out what she believes she can have. Because of what I learned in the various conversations we had about her past, she had been sexually abused in her early years. And because of that trauma, she had learned to believe that she couldn't have a loving relationship, that she learned that she had to be in a relationship where she had to have the upper hand, where she had to be the one that would take care of her partner so that she would never be dependent on her partner. And so I helped her to understand the relationship between her beliefs, her subconscious beliefs, her conscious choices, and her current situation in which she had already now lived 4 decades, and she learned a lot about her life. She learned what she was able to do, what she was able to have that counterbalanced self-limiting beliefs. And we disempowered the limiting beliefs, and we empowered her vision for her future. And she's now dating a man who's entirely different from the men that had been in her life previously, because she's learned how important and powerful it is to understand what she believed was possible for her and what she could change in her beliefs and her thoughts that would allow her to have a different result in her future. Now I want to talk about George. Similar to Jessica, George had lived a long life in which he had a long marriage of 25 years, and he'd raised 3 girls. And in this marriage, he thought that he would go off into the sunset with his wife. And instead, she left him for a younger man. Then he began to date, and Debbie seemed to be the perfect woman for him. She seemed to be very different from, let's call her Jill. So Jill had gone off with this younger man and abandoned George. And Debbie seemed to be the kind of woman who wouldn't abandon a man, wouldn't cheat on a man, wouldn't disappoint a man. She seemed to be a very different kind of person. And so they started a relationship with each other, which lasted about 8 years. And during those 8 years, George began to discover that Debbie was very much like Jill, seemed to have never grown out of her, let's say, adolescence, seemed to be very much like Jill, where it was always about her and rarely about George. And after 8 years with Debbie, he had to face the sad reality that if he didn't break up with Debbie, he probably would live a very miserable life into his future, and he just decided he wasn't going to do that anymore. And so he came to me to sort out the question, why do I keep repeating the same pattern? What's wrong with this picture? So George and I began to explore what he wanted in his future and to look at what his results had been with his wife, his ex-wife, and with his girlfriend, and to look at what his beliefs were, what his limiting beliefs were, what his thoughts were about what he could have in his life. And then we did go into the past. We did look at the role that his past played in his life. And he began to understand, again, the role that his thoughts played and that his subconscious played in his choice of, not just his choice of partner, but his choice of how to behave with his partner. He began to understand that he somehow kind of gave away the farm. He just kind of gave away everything to appease and to please his partner, and he never took care of himself. And so we began to do the work in which he understood what he had been afraid to wish for, had been afraid to hope for, and was willing to pay almost anything to get what he thought he could buy by just paying more, by getting more presents, and by being more submissive to his partner rather than more proactive and more even-handed and more even demanding about what he wanted in his relationship. So George is now forging his future as he's dating again. And as much as he wanted to give up, as much as he wanted to say, I've had it, I've been there, done that, I guess I can't do it right, he's learned that he can, because I've empowered him to dig deep to understand that he was in one way, consciously or unconsciously, responsible for his results. And if you're responsible for your results, you can change your future. So, Donna, who suffers from depression and despair because of her difficult life situations, has been working with therapists for many years. I would say 40 years. She's been going to therapists in which she was constantly rehashing her past, constantly trying to understand the role that her sisters and her mother and her father had played in her life, and why she was so dysfunctional, and why she only had a marriage that lasted less than a year, and she had never taken a chance on another relationship in her long, wonderful life. And so now in her 60s, she's reinventing herself yet again. and feeling often much despair and frustration because she had gotten used to beating up on herself when things didn't go right. And she would say, I just can't do anything right. What's wrong with me? Why can't I get this right? Why can't I understand? So when she started a new job and she was given the opportunity to learn new computer skills, it was challenging for her. So she took a class. Now she's just in the early stages of this new job and learning on the job what to do. But she's afraid. She's afraid she's going to lose the job. So she is working with me now on overcoming her despair, her depression, her low self-esteem right now, which she had begun to bolster up, and now she's in a challenging situation. So I'm combining my knowledge of her past. I'm combining my understanding of her lifelong struggle with depression. And I'm also understanding her lifelong habit of the way that she's been talking to herself. And I help her stay present. I have helped her learn how to meditate. I've helped her to understand by virtue of the meditation practice that her thoughts are not who she is, that her thoughts are a choice, and that she is already whole and complete and beautiful, and that her thoughts, when they're thoughts that are negative and sabotaging, that those are bad habits, past habits, and we need to come back and retool and empower her to speak to herself in another way so that she has a chance to get it right with learning the computer and get it right with learning new skills on a new job, and to take it on as a wonderful challenge and a wonderful possibility for her next chapter in life. And last, Jim Ray, who is a talented musician, has had a lifelong challenge with anxiety and depression and jealousy. So his history of relationships has been peppered with experiences of jealousy because he's afraid that if someone leaves him, it means he is not okay. And the fear of rejection is huge. So he's, after a 20-year hiatus of not having any significant relationship, after having lost someone he loved dearly to cancer, Jim Ray is wrestling with those demons in his head once again, in which he is obsessing and has these compulsive, obsessive thoughts that keep circling around. Literally, he feels like he's losing his mind, and there are times that he wants to jump out the nearest window, and he can't sleep at night. And so he came to me for help. How can I help the Jim Rays of the world who feel like they're losing their mind because their obsessive compulsive thoughts are overtaking everything? Like Debbie, Donna, I taught Jim Ray how to meditate. I repeated over and over again the mantra, you are not your thoughts. Your thoughts are not you. I taught him to silence or to quiet the mind, to observe the thoughts, and then to choose the thoughts he wanted to keep, and to say to the other ones, thanks for sharing. I'm not interested in what you have to say to me. And to learn how to talk to himself, to answer those voices of negativity, the voices that are driving him crazy, and to choose the thoughts that he wants to have, because he's the one driving the engine, because he's not his thoughts. Now, this is a coaching modality, and it's a therapeutic perspective as well, in which I am adding one tool to the other and combining depending on what the needs of the client are. But I'm always interested in serving each client. And how do I know? Because I invite intuition into the room. One of my most important tools as a coach, bringing into this coaching and therapeutic alliance, is the intuitive sense which is a form of wisdom and guidance that I've learned to listen to very carefully, that guides me in terms of what to pay attention to, guides me in terms of tuning into my client's energy, guides me in terms of asking the right question. I want to give you some closing tips so that you learn that how you speak to yourself, how you use words with yourself and your clients matters a lot. I want to suggest that you adjust the following. Change the but to and. It's the buts in our lives that get in the way of everything we want to experience, everything we want to do. So as a coach, I'm observing how a person is talking to me. So I listen to how the but is a red flag. And I teach my clients to shift to the and. So you could say, I feel like I never get it right, or I want to have this new career, but it's too late. And I say to my client, that's a very interesting thought. How about putting an and in there? I want to have this new career, and I want to do everything I can to make it happen. I want to write a book, but I don't have what it takes. How about I want to write a book, and I'm going to learn how to do a really good job at it. I often hear, I want someone in my life, but I don't want to trust again. And so as a coach, I'll say, how about changing that to I want to have someone in my life, and I'm willing to take a chance again. So to replace the buts in your life with and, to not allow the but to get in the way of what it is you want, or not to allow the but to get in the way of a connecting conversation between you and someone you love. Perhaps you're in the habit, or perhaps your client is in the habit of saying to someone, I love you, but. The but cancels out everything that came before. I love you, and sometimes I wish you wouldn't talk so much. Instead of I love you, but you talk too much. How about erasing the word never and replacing the word yet? I love the idea of just thinking about, this isn't happening yet. Or I don't have what I want in my life yet. I love the idea of yet because it's preparing me for the next step. It's preparing me for the future. So as a coach, what I offer are the tools of language and awareness of the importance of intention so that I'm paying attention to how my clients are stopping themselves before they even get out of the gate. So the word never needs to be replaced with yet. I never want to trust again. Could be what? I'm having trouble trusting, and I do want to love. Perhaps I'm not ready yet. I'm never going to get this right with this computer program. Or, I haven't gotten it right yet. Or I don't think I'm cut out for relationships. I never get it right. I've had one big disappointment and tragedy after another. Or I've learned a lot from the relationships in my life that haven't worked. I just haven't found the right person for me yet. Or I just love everything that I've learned about my life, and I'm not giving up. There are many ways to keep the door open, so these words, the but, the never, can be opened with an and or a yet. And then we have that wonderful word, can't. You know that story of the little train that could? I think I can, I think I can, I think I can. When your client is constantly throwing can'ts into the conversation, pay attention. I can't do anything right. I can't find the right partner for myself. I can't finish writing this book I've always wanted to write. I can't get this computer program in my head. I can't lose weight. I can't gain weight. So how's that working for you? But if we just erase the word can't and just continue to say, I think I can, I think I can, I think I can, or I know I can, or I'm determined to do this, I can do this. The word can be very, very powerful and empowering. So I use the tool of listening and the tool of language all the time to open the doors, to empower, to enlighten, to help the client see what they're saying to themselves matters. The words that they use, talking to themselves, matters. And last but not least is the importance of the questions we ask. I often say that it's the quality of the questions we ask that determine the quality of the lives we lead. Now, for me, this is a coaching tool which can apply to a coaching relationship or a therapeutic relationship. It's to notice that if I can shift the why question, which often leaves me feeling like a victim, and I shift it to a how or what, so I empower myself in some way. I change everything, and I change the quality. For instance, when my husband was very sick, and I felt that it was unfair and I felt overwhelmed, I found myself asking the question, why is this happening? Why is this happening to him? Why does this happen to us? And I felt like a victim. But the why question is often useless because it takes us nowhere but downhill. So I learned the value of asking the how question and the what question. For instance, how can I make this a blessing? What can I do to make this matter? Those are different kinds of questions from why is this happening? And very often the why question leads us to the analysis, which leads us to paralysis because we're going to our heads instead of our intuition and our hearts to solve a problem and choose a direction for the next step in our lives. And so I love the tool of the right question to bring us to another result in our lives because of how we are choosing to respond to a situation in life. I'm either going to respond in a way that I feel like a victim, or I'm going to respond in a way in which I feel like I have the power and the tools inside to respond to this situation in life. I am not helpless, and I'm not a victim. And so, let's review, in a way, what it is that brought me from falling asleep in a session with Amanda to staying fully awake with my clients now, 30 years later. One of the tools that I brought to my tool case, my toolkit, was the tool of being fully present. And how did I learn that? I learned how to meditate. Another tool that I brought to my toolkit as a result of my coaching practice was the tool of intuition, to realize that it was never my job to fix anything, but simply to listen to what the client really needed so that I could be present in asking the right question or hearing the right word that would give us a clue together as to where they needed and wanted to go, to repair their life, to renew their life, to reinvent themselves. And so I hope this has been helpful for you. I hope that you understand that there are many valuable modalities within coaching and therapy that can be of assistance to others who are struggling and in pain. And most important to me is the tool of empowerment and the tool of presence and the tool of intuition.